Thank you for coming out on this lovely Indian summer / fall day. There are so many things that you could be doing today, this afternoon, and we very much appreciate that you have taken time out of your very busy schedules to come and listen to this panel today. You are in for a special treat. This is an historic panel. I don't think it's very often that so many veterans of the civil rights movement in Southwest Georgia come together in one room to talk about their experiences. I, in particular, am thrilled to be here because it was 3 years ago. It's just unbelievable how quickly time passes. It was just 3 years ago that I visited Southwest Georgia on several occasions, thanks to the persistence of my graduate students like Lauren, Adi Ibrahimi, Christina Davis, who said to me, Dr. McCaskill, if we're going to research the civil rights movement in Georgia, well, by golly, we ought to find some real people who participated in the movement, and not just people in Atlanta, and talk to them. So we actually spent 2 summers just riding back and forth between Athens, Georgia, and Albany and Americus, Georgia, interviewing these movers and shakers of the Albany movement. The Albany movement is an important chapter in Georgia history. In Albany, Georgia, these activists in front of you attempted for the first time to integrate everything in their town as well as in Americus all at once. Rather than scaffolding the desegregation of public institutions, they decided that the time had come to dismantle it all at once. By the end of this roughly 18-month period in the early 1960s, hundreds of African American and white citizens of Albany and Americus and surrounding counties had been jailed. Dr. King had come to town. His right-hand man, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, had come to town. And the Albany movement had made national news. The Albany movement catalyzed and gave inspiration and momentum to the activism of the civil rights movement to come in the mid-60s. So we're very proud, we're very, very jubilant, really, to have these members of the Albany movement here today to share their reflections of the movement with us and to consider how the movement might be relevant to those of us, like me, like some of you, coming a generation after, who want to take the advice, the experience of these activists and help make our communities, our world, a better place. I'm going to begin by briefly introducing all of our activists to you. I'd like them just to nod. If they'd like to stand when I introduce them, that's okay too. And then we're going to just zip right in to the questions. I want this to be a conversation. I will open this up after about 30-35 minutes to you, so that you, as members of the audience, also have a chance to ask questions that have been on your mind or that arise during the discussion. Our first activist on the panel that I'd like to introduce is Reverend Charles M. Sherrod. Reverend Charles Sherrod was one of the organizers and leaders of the student involvement in the Albany movement. He was born and raised in Petersburg, Virginia, in the church, I understand, singing, worshiping, and even preaching as a young man in the church. In 1961, he attended the founding conference of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and shortly thereafter traveled to Albany, Georgia, where he helped to mobilize demonstrations, register Southwest Georgians to vote, and hold seminars on the use of nonviolence. He also was one of the inventors of a very important strategy that SNCC and other civil rights activists use, and and that strategy was called the jail, no bail policy. And the idea behind this, I think there's some activists in the room, some of you are nodding. The idea behind this jail, no bail strategy was that the activists would clog the jails. And they certainly did so in Albany and Americus. And in doing so, they would bring national attention to the social injustices that were rife throughout Southwest Georgia in particular and throughout the South in general. After the Civil Rights Movement, the classic years of the movement, Reverend Sherrod earned a master's degree in sacred theology from Union Theological Seminary. He continued to serve actively in the Southwest Georgia community. He directed the Southwest Georgia Project for Community Education. He has served as a chaplain at the Georgia State Prison. He also served for many years, from 1976 to 1990, on the Albany, Georgia City Commission. So I think that that's just a beautiful story. He began his career as an activist, helping African Americans in his community to gain political access, and when they did, he became one of those political leaders by participating on the Albany City Commission. You can find a beautiful tribute to Reverend Sherrod on the PBS website entitled This Far by Faith, and I would just like to conclude my introduction of Reverend Sherrod by reading this tribute to you, because I think it really helps to kick off the entire symposium that we will be having over the course of these 2 days. During the summer of 1961, Charles Sherrod came to Southwest Georgia as a field secretary for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And Southwest Georgia has not been the same since his arrival. He came to this area and lived with us, fought with us, and helped us to see that we could work together to break the chains of bondage. He stayed because he knows that freedom is a constant struggle. Welcome, Reverend Sherrod. Our next activist wears several hats like so many of the participants on the panel today. The other major hat that she wears is that of songbird. This is Ms. Rutha Harris, a lifelong resident of Albany, Georgia. Her parents were founders of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Albany, Georgia. Her mother was a longtime school teacher in Albany, Georgia, and later in her career, Ms. Rutha, as we like to call her, followed in her mother's footsteps and became an award-winning teacher in Southwest Georgia in her own right. Ms. Harris joined the Albany movement in 1961, and in the movement, she realized the ways in which songs could serve as political tools. And she co-founded with several other young people, Bernice and Cordell Reagan, Charles Neblett, the famous Albany Freedom Singers. This group traveled over 50,000 miles in 48 of the contiguous United States, singing freedom songs to educate Americans about nonviolence and about the claims for social justice that African Americans were making in Southwest Georgia. Between 1961 and 1962, in addition to traveling with the Freedom Singers, Ms. Rutha was also jailed 4 times in protest in Albany with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Ms. Rutha graduated from Albany State, and in 1963, she and the other Freedom Singers signed a contract with Mercury Records. Her singing career continues to this day. She has performed in such places as Carnegie Hall, the Smithsonian Institution, the United Nations. She also was featured as a member of the Georgia Mass Choir in the film The Preacher's Wife, starring Denzel Washington and Whitney Houston. And those of you who are students of the music of the 60s might appreciate knowing that Ms. Rutha has shared the stage with singers at the March on Washington, with singers at important jazz festivals in the 1960s, with singers of the likes of Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, and Peter, Paul, and Mary. And in fact, unfortunately, after this panel, Ms. Rutha must rush off because one of the singers in Peter, Paul, and Mary has passed away, and she's been invited to sing at the funeral. Still continuing to use her song as an educational tool today, Ms. Harris continues to lead the Freedom Singers in Southwest Georgia. She's received the key to the city of Albany twice. Who can do that? I didn't know you could do that. But she's received the key to the city twice from Mayor Tommy Coleman. She's received the Martin Luther King Dream Award, and she has been named an outstanding Georgia citizen by our Secretary of State, Kathy Cox. We are sharing the room with an outstanding Georgia citizen, and I'd like to think, Ms. Rutha, that you are looking out on many outstanding Georgia citizens to be. Welcome to our panel. Okay, I'm going to introduce the next two participants jointly because they really, literally, walked together, went to jail together during the Americus movement. They're representing tiny Americus, Georgia, which we may know as a very small town in the southwest corner of our state, but Americus proved itself to be a titan during the civil rights movement. Sandra Mansfield and Varner Seay both participated during the summer of 1963 in a series of protest marches that sadly often ended in violence in Americus, Georgia. They were trying, like their counterparts in Albany, to desegregate all public institutions in Americus, Georgia. As a consequence of one of these protests, they became part of a group of 33 girls. And I want to stress that these were girls. These were young people of middle school and high school age, not even college students. They became part of a group of 33 girls who were imprisoned during August of 1963 in a concrete bunker. It still stands today. I've been there with Mrs. Mansfield, outside of Americus, called the Leesburg Stockade. They were imprisoned in this stockade, understand, a concrete bunker in August in the state of Georgia. It is nothing but heat. They were imprisoned in this bunker for almost a month. For the first 2 days, they were given no food. The conditions were appalling. They had to sleep on the floor. There were no showers. They hardly had ways of keeping clean. They were given buckets of water to keep themselves clean on occasion. The food was spotty after those first 2 days. It was only after a reporter, a photographer, and a student member of SNCC named Danny Lyons managed to sneak in, take pictures, and release them worldwide through the Associated Press that these young girls, all 33 of them, were liberated, were freed. And even then, to add insult to injury, the Americus police charged the parents of these girls $2 for every day for each girl who had stayed in this stockade for the allegedly disorderly conduct that they had enacted on the town of Americus. Ms. Seay and Ms. Mansfield both still continue to live and serve in Americus. Varner Seay is senior pastor at Faith Deliverance Christian Center in Americus. And finally, last but not least, I would like to introduce Pamela Kohn, who is doing extraordinary work telling the stories of activists like these Albany and American activists through her talent of being a documentary filmmaker. Pamela Kohn is an independent producer with 5 years of producing experience and over a decade of hands-on experience in script development, film marketing, and sales. She has worked for the last 5 years as a producer for feature films and television, and she most recently signed a deal for both feature film and television for a project entitled Be a King Productions, which is an Atlanta-based production company headed by Elder Bernice King. And if her name sounds familiar, it's because you guessed right. Elder Bernice King is one of the daughters of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And didn't she just become the first woman president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference? Yes, okay, very good. So Pam is working with the best. Her film and television producing credits also include, many of you might be familiar with this television series, Somebodies, which initially premiered as a film at the Sundance Film Festival in 2006 and won the Special Grand Jury Prize for Screenwriting at the Sarasota Film Festival. Somebodies premiered on BET during the summer of 2008, and Pam helped to produce all 10 episodes. She's working on numerous projects simultaneously, which I'm beginning to understand is what people in film always do. And those projects include a very interesting film called Rain that was filmed in the Bahamas and is the first indigenous feature film to be shot in that country. It won the Audience Choice Award at the Bahamas International Film Festival. She also finalized production just recently on another film entitled Bottle World. If Pam looks familiar to you, those of you who live and work in the Athens community, then you probably have encountered her at the Robert Osborne Classic Film Festival, which she directs, and which I am very much looking forward to because I love gangster movies and they're showing The Godfather on the big screen this time. So welcome, Pamela Kohn. I'm going to begin by asking the panel to consider a question that I asked them to consider prior to this panel. I just want them to do some free association with us for a few minutes. I asked the members of the panel to think about what first comes to mind when they hear that phrase, civil rights. A person, a place, an event, a year, and then to talk to us about it. So I'm going to open up the panel now and ask you to share your comments. When you hear that phrase, civil rights, and I know you hear it frequently, being who you are, could you share with us what first comes to mind and why that's meaningful to you? And I'm just going to move down the row here. I don't want to do it all the time. I'm not going to put you on the spot all the time, Reverend Sherrod, but I'm going to put you on the spot first now.
When I think of civil rights, I think of civil wrongs. Because all through my life, I've never felt that I had civil rights. And all that I know about my people in history points to the same thing, civil wrongs. Always been done civilly wrong, injustices. We can't speak out. The amendments of the Constitution, we don't have any of those rights. And it's just a farce. We go to the armed forces and fight overseas in the First World War, the Second World War, Vietnam, and come back home to be segregated again. Civil wrong. And so that's what I think of.
And just from the passion in your voice, I think that we understand that that must have been a great inspiration to you to become an activist and to become so involved in SNCC. But I'm also hearing in your tone a sense that some of those civil wrongs you think still might not be addressed. Is that correct? That,
That's correct.
Okay.
And there are many things that we still need to fight for. We're seeing a whole generation of children, of young adults, strung out on drugs. It's not impossible to reverse, but without the mind to do it, like we do not have the mind to do right by our people. And this is black and white. The white folk have been told a lie for a long time, and that they believe. White folk believe that if I'm white, I'm all right. If I'm white, no matter that I can't send my kid to school, or where the rich whites send their kids to school, I'm white. Don't worry about it. I'm white. Don't worry that I can't put a steak on the table when I want to put a steak on the table. I'm white. I'm right. Just vote white and run white and sleep white and be white. And that's the lie that's been told white folk. And they live with it and they love it. And it's still a concept that we've got to deal with in our future, in our country. Because we can only deal with the problem of racism if black and white people deal with it together. It cannot be dealt with just by white folk or just by black folk. We'll be suffering a long time.
so you're asking us to, no matter what our racial or ethnic background, to think about ways in which we're blind to suffering and maybe blind to the fact that we're not as privileged as we think.
Well, who's the richest country in the world, most powerful countries in the world, and everybody's looking to see whether we're going to supposed to be. Something wrong. We are the greediest people in the world. That's one thing that's wrong.
Okay. Ms. Rutha? Ms. Harris?
Well, when I think about civil rights, I think about freedom. Wouldn't you? I'm supposed to have my civil rights. I'm supposed to be free. But I'm not. I had to go to jail. I had to be dragged. Couldn't go to a hotel. If I was traveling, I couldn't use the restroom. The place where I would buy gas, they wouldn't let me use the restroom. I'd have to stop on the side of the road. Couldn't get a sandwich. They wouldn't feed me, wouldn't sleep me. That's what I think of civil rights. Being treated inhuman. Being treated like a dog. That's what civil rights means to me.
And in your answer, I think we heard that not only does it mean unequal treatment, but it also means fighting back, pushing back against that unequal treatment.
Exactly. That's what we had to do if we wanted to be free. We had to fight for something that was already ours in the first place.
Mrs. Mansfield? Sandra?
When I think of civil rights, I think of Jesus. Because Martin Luther King was the voice of God, whether people know it or not. When he spoke, billions of people had ears to hear and some didn't. And I thank God that I was one of the people that had ears to hear the message that was coming through, that it was to be peace, unity on the earth. And when his mission was accomplished, God moved him to see what the dream stay alive. But to look around here today, the dream is not still alive because there's still hatred. We have people coming to the United States they have been treated like the black people used to be treated. And they are human, they are our brothers and sisters, and there's only two kind of peoples in the world, Christians and non-Christians, believing in the Word of God and not believing the Word of God. And that's what civil rights means to me.
So you have shared the cornerstone of the activism of Southern blacks during the civil rights era, and that is the love. That is the cornerstone of Christianity.
Yes, love.
Carol?
Wow. I was going to make it very personal, but struggles. When I hear the word civil rights, struggles. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't look at a white man or a white woman in the face. Even if I was 6 and they were 6, I couldn't look them in their eyes. I had to look down. I couldn't sit where I wanted to sit. Couldn't go where I wanted to go. Basically, I couldn't eat what I wanted to eat. If I wanted to eat in a restaurant, couldn't do that. If I wanted to go to a movie, couldn't go in the front door. So, struggles. Can't do this, can't do that.
So much of the history of the civil rights movement that we study in the classroom focuses on the huge events, like the March on Washington, like the Montgomery Bus boycott. But what I'm hearing so many of you talk about is the dailies, the ordinaries, everyday humiliations and indignities which motivated you. And I think it's so true that we often get off of our couches, not because of some huge international issues, but because of something that's going right on in our own backyards that immediately affects us. Pam.
Well, I feel extremely honored and privileged to be seated among such wonderful human beings, such incredible activists, and I'm very humbled to be on this panel, as I myself, as a South African and being white, actually sort of was on the other end of this equation. I am a born South African, and I was in South Africa for a few years before going to East Africa and traveling, and then lived in Portugal. But I did, of course, which is previous to Nelson Mandela, of course, coming into being president of South Africa. And I was exposed to so many injustices, that I saw as on the other side of it, being a white South African. And I was very young at the time, of course, I was just a child. But, the effect of, seeing things that were not correct definitely had an imprint on me as a being. And I think that's part of why I'm motivated, I believe, to be where I am today, wanting to actually be a part of telling the stories of so many injustices that have happened on the side of race or economics or whatever it might be. I think just being exposed to that has motivated me to want to bring your stories to light so that they are shared and seen to every generation, so that's something that's there for posterity and can be tapped into. So I feel humbled, but when I think of civil rights, from my sensibility, I think of Nelson Mandela. Just from my perspective, and his quest for peace and a peaceful changeover and exchange from one political stance into another. He was really wanted the message of peace to be part of the equation, even through the injustice that he himself suffered, and of course all the people, black South African people, suffered. During that time. So, Nelson Mandela is somebody that I think of when I think of civil rights, in that civil rights being civility to all mankind.
I'd like to stay with a theme that's emerged in your initial responses, and that is of personal stories and personal experiences that motivated you to become involved in the kind of activism that you do, whether it was during the civil rights movement or not. Again, so often when we study the civil rights movement, we study the big events. We study the big names. I want to hear from you about what we don't see as scholars of the movement, as students of the movement, when we look at films, when we read books. And what we don't see very often are the inner struggles, the inner demons that all of you must have faced in order to do what you did, go to jail, non-violently accept beatings, non-violently accept insults. How did you overcome fear? How did you overcome hesitation? How did you overcome what I understand sometimes was the non-support of family members and friends? You were too young, they said. You're risking your future, they said. How did you wrestle with your inner demons? And I'm going to open this up now. We don't have to go in any particular order. Rutha, it looks like you have you have something to say about this.
As an original freedom singer, the songs of the movement played a very important role in the civil rights struggle. Find you a song to sing would take away the fear, take away the sounds of the billy clubs. Songs would take away the sound of fire hoses. The songs would tell you that you ain't gonna let nobody turn you around. You start singing a song, you forget that there's a policeman in front of you with a billy club telling you if you move, I'm gonna hit you. Singing those songs took away fear. 'Cause I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no billy club turn me around, turn me around, no, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no billy club turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, yeah, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
My God.
Now, just listening to you, the sound is a force. It's as if that sound could tear down walls and tear down mountains. I'm so glad you sang for us because it modeled how uplifting that music could be. And I remember talking to you before, and you're telling us that it wasn't just during the marches and the sit-ins that you sang, that the mass meetings were very important. Could you tell us, could some of you tell us a little bit about the role that the mass meeting served?
The mass meeting served a great purpose. Before we ever started our mass meeting, we started it with prayer. We sung freedom songs. It inspired us. It was like something instilled in you. It was like work you knew you had to accomplish. And through doing it, sacrifices had to be made. And it was no way that you wanted to turn around. You wanted to look straight ahead. You wanted to make a change. You could see things that happened in the past. For instance, like when my mother and I was walking and it was this little black symbol in somebody's yard. And my little cousin was with us. And he had on a little hat with different colors. And this white woman said he looked like that little black symbol. I could see the expression on my mother's face. And when things got tough, I could remember her face, and it made me want to keep on.
You've been to jail. Oh, I'm sorry.
In the mass meetings, when attending them, which I attended from the first mass meeting, clean up into town, I was locked up. I even attended the speaking of Martin Luther King in Albany the night that he spoke at the church, and I hung out with Sneak. All of them took care of me. I wasn't allowed to play on my side of town with the kids because they feared I would get them involved. But every day I couldn't wait till I got to a mass meeting. It was just like family, unity. We stuck by each other. My mother trusted me to them, and I walked with them every day. And it was just amazing how the strength that we had from God, how strong it was.
All of you, also, the four of you, were in jail at various periods during the Albany and Americus movements, and I understand that you also sang while you were in jail. Could you talk to us a little bit about the experience of going to jail? Because that was certainly an important strategy, to fill up the jails, to embarrass the police officers, to embarrass the public officials, to bring the news cameras to those jails and show the students. Could you talk to us a little bit about how it felt when the cameras went away, when the reporters were not allowed into City Hall to see you? What was it like and what got you through? I'm especially interested in Carol and Sandra. You're telling us a little bit about what it was like to be in that stockade, not knowing if anyone even knew where you were.
Love, love, unity. We had each other. Even though some of us had siblings left at home, our moms and dad, but we had each other. We showed love, agape love. Not the love that I hug you and you turn around and I frown up, but real love, true love. That was unity. We fortified ourselves in jail. And we knew that we had each other there, but most of all, children in the South, we was brought up in church, so we knew that it was God. Speaking personally, I didn't have what I want to say. I didn't have a relationship with God at that time, but I knew of Him. And just that kept us going. And when one would feel down and out, or, you know, crying, or whatever the reason was, we would love on that person, we would pray, and we would sing. And it was so, I mean, right now, I feel really full. Because I jotted down some notes. And I haven't seen my friend Rutha there since in a while. Sometimes we end up on the same panels or the same engagement. But that song, I wasn't going to sing it. I was going to just share it. Ain't going to let nobody turn me around. See, we was kids, 12, 13. But when you sung that song, you really meant it. You didn't just say words from your lips, but it was from your innermost being. Ain't gonna let nobody. So at 12, at 13, it was like, okay, this is real. No matter what happens to me, somebody is coming behind me. If I don't make it out, because we were told that, you know, every day you were going to be taken out and killed. Yes, if they grabbed Sandra, I would hold on to her, the rest of the girls would hold on to her. But if you're a grown up, a man, you would overpower us as kids. We would hold you until we couldn't. But the songs, prayer, you did what you was taught. In the mass meeting, it gave you instruction and directions. In other words, it was the foundation. The foundation was laid. And you didn't have to do another foundation, just build on what was already there. So the songs, the love, unity, and the prayers got us through.
And you had fun too, because we have you on tape. Improvising. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. And you're singing lines like, ain't gonna let Judge Pritchett, Sheriff Pritchett turn me around, Chief Pritchett.
That's all there.
You want to take a look, those of you who are familiar with the news film that we have, and watch these activists in action, because they really have fun improvising with some of these songs and inserting real people in those songs. And I just wanted to call attention to that, because that was part of the movement too. It was that camaraderie,
That's
right?
how the civil rights songs came about, because of those people. The songs were taken from spiritual, gospel, rhythm and blues, and then they just changed the words to fit whatever the occasion was.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Over me, over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. And go home to my Lord and be free, and be free. Maybe a funny thing that when I went to jail, I went to rest. And had a good time. Well, because when I was out of jail, we all got to knock on doors, got to make sure everybody's safe, make sure nobody gets killed, make sure that people are getting food to eat. A lot of responsibilities when I'm out of jail. Boy, when I get to go to jail, lay up and rest and so forth. But it wasn't always a happy time. We made it a happy time. We had just as many fun songs as we had serious songs. We sang a song.
Oh, we ain't here, look at all we ain't here.
Oh, we ain't here, look at all we ain't.
Look at all the grits we ate.
Look at all
the grits we ate. Grits we ate.
Oh,
we ate here.
look at all we
ate here.
All we ate is look at all we ate.
When you're a child and you go from jump rope, jackstones, to a jail cell, you have to. In order to keep your sanity as a child, you got to make it fun. Yes, there was tears, but there was plenty of laughter. And because you had the support of someone else in the jail with you, knowing that you didn't understand everything about civil rights or about freedom, you just knew that you wasn't treated right. You knew that. You knew on your side of town, it was all one color. But when you go downtown, now we're fancy, we call it downtown. When we go uptown, you know, most of the time that's on a Saturday, you see other people of other colors that does not live on your side of town. So from jump rope, jacks, you had to make it fun. In the stockades, we put on talent shows, and you express your talent. After that, you might go to a corner and cry, or be sad. But through it all, you did what you had to do, even as children.
Pam, I'd like to bring you into this conversation. You're telling the stories of activists like our panelists, our fellow panelists, what are you thinking about, what are you trying to say in revisiting these times that they've talked about?
Well, I was really excited to meet with Elder Bernice King a couple of years ago and discuss the potential of working together and bringing stories during the civil rights movement to light. Things that, of course, Bernice has a real passion to bring a sort of a standard of awareness to this younger generation, and to share the experiences of a generation gone by that actually fought for all of the liberties that have come about so far. And she, in fact, wants very much to work with the ladies seated next to me, specifically in Americus, Georgia, to tell the story of the girls in the stockade. And I was really privileged to go down to Americus about a year ago or so, a year and a half ago, and meet with some of the other ladies as well in Americus. And we've, forged a relationship where we will be telling that story and bringing this very important story onto film. So Bernice is, wanting very much to tell a lot of stories that are close to her heart, that are part of the history of course, what she stands for. And I'm very privileged to be a part of that. So, for me today to be actually seated, with everybody and listening to the songs and everything, and knowing that part of the passion and being able to sustain oneself and live through fear through song is something wonderful that I really look forward to working with everybody on the project. But in terms of stories worldwide, I've just been very lucky to be introduced and kind of meeting people along the way and with similar intentions. And it's just been very fortunate that I've been able to work with a writer from the Bahamas, or a writer-director, to tell a story from the Bahamas that was also a story of struggle, a different kind of a struggle, but again, a story of poverty and of illness. But again, a lot to contend with and a lot of injustice as well within that whole arena. And so far, I've really learned so much, and that's part of what I enjoy, is that I'm exposed to so much history, to so much heart, really. I mean, just sitting here and feeling the power of the truth of who you are. Mm-hmm. And if I can bring that through the medium of film to people so that that power is shared, I think that's where what part I have to play in, at least bringing this message of hope, I hope, to the world.
I'd like to ask one more question about the Albany Americus movements, and then I'd like to flash forward and talk a little bit about today. The last question I'm asking actually comes out of conversations that I've had over the years with students about the civil rights movement, who often are aghast at the way you handled yourselves when you confronted violence. In other words, I've often encountered students who are very skeptical about nonviolence as a weapon of social protest. So I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about nonviolence and about whether or not, if you face similar circumstances today, that would be a plan of action that you would undertake. Would you still find nonviolence to be an effective tool of social protest?
Personally, I still think we need to be nonviolent. Mm-hmm. Because we don't own anything. Mm-hmm. We as a black race, we don't have access to guns. We would be killed if we aren't going to be nonviolent. So yes, now it's still personal. we need to use that same tactic.
So,
I might be wrong, I don't know.
so nonviolence was a pragmatic, it was a practical approach. You were outnumbered, you were outgunned. How do you fight forces that could annihilate you?
And what we did, we sang a song. And I'm serious. The songs dropped them to their knees. The songs kept us alive, some of us. Of course, you know that some were killed, but the majority of us are still alive. But the songs did keep us alive.
I think the notion of fear that Charles mentioned in the beginning about being something that can be such a block for change, and I think with Dr. Martin Luther King and also with Nelson Mandela, they both seem to be men without fear, and I think that is very striking in that they went forward with no regard to their own safety or, they knew what they wanted to achieve and they went forward without fear. And I think that to me, I think, is where change can really happen, is if, if the belief is in something that is true and is something that needs to happen, that change needs to happen, then if you go forward without that fear in you, then I think inherently somehow barriers fall away. But if you have fear in you, I think then somehow nothing can happen. So I think to me...
Now, of course, all of us were afraid.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I understand that. I understand the fear,
we knew who was on our side.
Right, you overcame it with your songs, with your faith, with your everything. So despite your fear, you went forward, I think.
If I had to do it over again, yes, I would still be nonviolent. I believe in order to be a real servant, you must serve humanity in the spirit of love and nonviolence. Why? Jesus did.
And we were brought up in the church. We didn't go to the South, I was raised in the South. We didn't go to the South expecting to find some great group of people with nonviolence already. But that's what we found. We found people who were reared on the belief that God was with them, that God wanted them to overcome evil with good, and to hate nobody. We were taught as children, we were always taught to love everybody. One way that I got a lot of people to act was to challenge them as to who was stronger in their minds and in their image in their minds, white folk or God. But who do you believe in? You believe in white folk or God? Well, why can't you go down to the courthouse then? I mean, you scared of these white folk? Or are you scared of God? You ought to be scared of God. He can take both your mind and your body and your soul. So all these years you've been falsifying that you believe in God, that you love the Lord, and all of this. So I got a lot of people to start thinking that way just by confronting them with their own faith. But there was a group in the South who had not known the Pharaoh. They didn't know that anybody who'd been so strong in their image that they could kill, or that they could whip you, and that they could shoot you. That was a young people in Southwest Georgia. 11-year-olds and 15-year-olds, 13-year-olds. They weren't afraid of no white folk. They didn't know nothing about being afraid of nobody. They weren't afraid of their mama. They weren't afraid of their daddy. was a new element that had grown up there, and they were there for us to utilize. We just took a little time for us to understand, here's the group, here's the folk. Every time we opened the church, every time we found a church that was strong enough to allow us to use the church, we had a full church every time. And all over these, not these ages here, but but these teenagers, they were ready for Friday. And so all we had to do was to teach them the techniques of nonviolence, of direct action in love. All we had to teach them those things, stay an arm's length at least an arm's length from the person in front of you. Don't ever bunch up so that you crowd people out from going into a store or to a Picadilly somewhere. No loud talking or cussing. All right, Rutha, let me have that switchblade you got.
Never is carrying a switchblade.
Never did we ever. I can't think of a time that we had 24 kids in the place that we're preparing them to march out of, not even to find at least one switchblade. At least one. So these were violent folk for the most part, but they were willing to be non-violent. So it was a tactic for them. But then there were others who were just full of love. They were raised to love. You're not supposed to hate people. You're not supposed to call them this and call them these bad names that they always call them, though. And so when we were ready to demonstrate, the only thing we had to really knock them in the head about was, look, who told y'all to go downtown? Was it Sherrod? No, it wasn't Sherrod. You went downtown on your own. Because see, that's 30 or 40 years in jail for me, for juveniles, juvenile delinquency. What's that? Juvenile delinquency.
You mentioned how it wasn't always easy to find a church to have a meeting. Some people wouldn't let you have the meeting in their churches. Why?
Okay. And it was only certain churches in the beginning, like Allen Chapel. We had a few churches that, you know, we could go and participate and have our mass meeting. Like Friendship and some of the others came in later on. But the founders was at Allen Chapel. Reverend Campbell, he was a strong supporter. Grandma Barnum and Miss Barnum.
That's funeral home.
That's funeral home. Funeral home.
Remember what the funeral home
we even had it at, we had some things at the funeral home.
Yeah.
Made posters and stuff at the funeral
Churches
home.
wouldn't open up.
Because certain churches wouldn't let us come in. But at Allen Chapel, when we met up, they made us sandwiches and stuff. We made our protest sign. We had our singing and praising of the Lord, you know, and we always did at first. And we went on with our mass meetings for a while. I was 11 years old when it first came to town. We went on with the mass meeting, the mass meetings, and the mass meetings. And when it became active, I remember, you know, being at the movies in different places, sleeping out at the courthouse, being in places where I could have been locked up, but my protectors always pulled me to the side. I'm an only child. My mama trusted me with them. The day of my arrest, I had to run from the line to get permission from my mother to get locked up. So I ran back and my mom was standing across the street, which I am an only child, but she was standing across the street. But the way I really got involved with the civil rights movement is like a chucking in my heart. It was something that I had to do. It was like, it was no way around it. And I remember saying out loud, if they ever come to America, I'm gonna be a part, just watching the news. And she turned the television off. And she asked me some questions, but it was something that I said I was willing to give my life. And she spoke these words, if that's how strong you feel about it. If they ever come to Americus, you'll get there if I have to walk you there. And my mama was a woman of her word. The first mass meeting cleanup until the time I was locked up. I hung out with SNCC, Scope, Southern Christian Leadership. They was my big brothers, and Bob Mash was my dad. You had a bad dad. And so every day I walked through the white neighborhood to the black neighborhood where they was. And when they had mass meetings, I had papers under my arms, and I walked through the white neighborhood to inform the black people of the mass meeting. I had no fear. I had Christ. It was something I had to do, and I didn't mind giving my life for it.
And see, that didn't happen one minute, y'all. And there's nobody in the movement, if they told you the truth, was said that they were completely without fear, including God. He had to grow. He had to grow to accept death. Death is not an easy thing to deal with. But in our working, in our work, and where we were working, under conditions that we worked, you're seeing somebody every day, watching you every day, following you every day, calling on the telephone, nigga, I'm going to kill you every day. You got to do something in your mind or in your heart to stop your hand from doing like that, or your knees from doing like that when they ain't supposed to do like that. You can't think like that. You can't strategize like that. You can't advise young people like that. So I had to pray to ask the Lord to take this shaking away. It was, I couldn't think. I couldn't come up with my strategies and so forth. And the Lord took away that fear. Oh boy, when the Lord took away that fear, I was bad.
I think you still are.
I could look a white man in the face or a white woman in the face and say what I wanted to say, and understood from that point why they always go for their gun. I'm the nonviolent one. What you read in the newspaper about me? I'm nonviolent. I'm gonna hit you. I'm gonna shoot you. I'm gonna throw you down. I'm the one that loves you. But every time, they'd either put their hand on their gun like that, on the holster, take it out, and the next thing I know, if they take it out, the next thing I know it's going to be on my head. So all those times, the Lord gave me this time. I have heard a bullet. I have felt the wind from a bullet on my ear. I have had a pistol to the back of my head. Nigga, move. Let one drop fall. I was in the bathroom trying to get ready to move up. Let one drop fall. One drop. And I'm feeling the pistol in the back of my head. So I've died at least about 5 or 6 times. But I'm still here.
Yes. I think that's a great way to segue into talking about now. I'd like to hear from those of you who are living and working still in Southwest Georgia. What needs to be done in your communities? What issues are you working on? Are you concerned about? What still needs attending to in Southwest Georgia?
In Southwest Georgia, as in our whole country, we are still a people divided, first in our minds and our hearts. And these other problems that we have with poor people is a class problem. Is the black poor and the white poor if we could ever get the white poor to see that they're in the same shape that we in, then we'd be able to do something with our problem. But white folk, I told you before, white folks still think they white, and that makes a big difference. Rich people don't care nothing about white folks. They care about green folks. That's what they care about. And so we still have gaps in our education. We're the worst educated people in the world, look like the richest nation in the world with the worst education. You know about money, our economy is about to blow up or blow down. Everybody accepts that. We're in trouble. So, if we don't come together, if we don't find a way to come together, deal with this racism, then we're going the way of Rome, the way of Greece. We're going down. We're going down.
And we're still segregated in our community. The most segregated hour is what?
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock on Sunday morning.
All over the country.
All over the world. You might see a little speck here and a speck there. But we're still segregated.
I promised I would let Carol have the last word. I want to reserve some time to open this up to the audience. Carol, I'd like you to share some comments targeted specifically to the young people in our audience today, the high school students, the college students. What do you think they can learn from your activism?
First of all, I would like to say, I would like to go to your last question, and I know you're bringing that out. Why do you think civil rights movement still matters in the new century to young people like the students here in our audience?
Right.
And I would like to say, I don't think the civil rights movement still matters. Let me say it again. I don't think the civil rights movement still matters. Got your attention?
Quiet down somebody here. Yes, it
You
is.
got
Now,
mine too.
I don't think the civil rights movement still matters. I know it does. I don't think, I know it does.
Thank you.
Especially in this new century to young people like the students in our audience today. Why? Because freedom is still not free. In this new century, we have modern day slavery. Women's, boys, and girls. We have now commercial sexual exploitation. So, do I think the civil rights movement still matters? I don't think. Yes, I do know it matters. Thank you.
They say that freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. We've been struggling so long. We must be free. We must be free.
On that note, I would like to thank our participants for their comments so far. And in our time remaining, I would like to open this up to you, the members of the audience. Please. Yes, Dr. Pratt?
Yes, for the benefit of those of us here who don't know much about the campaigns in Albany and in Americus, I wonder if the panelists could speak to some of the specifics about those campaigns. Reverend Sherrod in particular, I know you were very very vital to the work in the Albany campaign. I'd like to hear you talk about why SNCC made the decision to start doing grassroots and community organizing in Albany, SNCC's relationship with SCLC, with King, the role of Laurie Pritchett, and why you think he's so important to everything that happened or maybe did not happen in Albany.
That's maybe half an hour. Probably take longer than that. We were trying to, well, in Tarrant County, there was an injunction by the Justice Department that it was an action that we thought would be helpful to get people registered to vote. And so I came, and others followed me, came to Southwest Georgia to do voter registration in general. That's why we came, to do voter registration. So everything, I thought that we would have ultimately 2 congressional districts representative, congressional representative from the 2nd and a congressional representative from the 3rd. And the way they were apportioned at the time in 1961, we had the people to do it. But they gerrymandered it. But we still got one. The other thing was that we were learning, and so we couldn't get the old folk to follow us step by step. There were always some middle-aged people, say 30 and 40, and 1 or 2 older people like Reverend Wells and a couple of others, Silas Brothers, and we always had a good group. So the direction of least resistance was actually what we did. I'm trying to explain it that way. They weren't giving us this, then we went this way. They weren't giving us this, we go this other way. But we never stopped registering people to vote. We were always registering people to vote. But when we got that young group, when we found out this, we had a crazy group. And they were with us. We told them to go get on their heads in the middle of the street. What would they do? We had some followership. We had some leadership. We had some followership. So that's the way we went. I know I'm not answering your question specifically, but I'm just saying that in general, where their weakest point was, that's where we went. We came for voter registration. When we ran people to be elected, we didn't really think they were going to get elected, but we were doing voter registration with the people. All this time they had nobody to vote for. Hey, then we give you somebody to vote for. Here's somebody to vote for. Here's a reason to register. So then we got more people registered because there's somebody was running. But that vote, somebody got elected. Hey! So let's elect more people. And now in about 16 counties, we got the majority, and we got people elected. Some county, that same county, Tarrant County, where nobody, we got about 17 people elected, including the mayor and the sheriff.
The relationship with SCLC.
Oh, the relationship with SCLC.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that relationship was always good. Contrary to the newspapers, it was always good relationship. They had that little argument they had was over money, fundraising. If you're working somewhere, you got to, in order to raise money from people who know about you, you got to tell them what you're doing. So what is SCLC, NAACP, SNCC, Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee, the CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, all working in the same place, all of us raising money, all of us gonna say what we did. But what did we do? What we were doing. So they gonna say the same thing, because ain't but one action going on. And that's what we're arguing about. But as far as coming down here and sharing these bullets and sharing these slaps upside the head, hey, Doc, when y'all coming back? You want everybody we can to come down here and fight with us.
And usually whenever Dr. King goes into a place, it's already started.
We've already been there.
He's just there for publicity. Wherever he comes, wherever he is, the media is going to be there. And that's how you get all your stuff on television.
But on the other hand now, when Doc came, we talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when Doc came, I didn't have to knock on them doors. See, when Doc came to work, we got full church, we got full this, we got folk to demonstrate and so forth. I love for Doc to come. Oh, so there's less work for me.
Young lady, I just wanted to know, was there like a moment in any of your lives that you knew that this is what you had to do, that you didn't want to take anymore, or this was your purpose in life, like there was nothing else, you weren't taking anymore, and you were going to stand up and fight? Was there a moment that made you feel that way about the movement?
Me, myself, it was something I was instilled to do, something I was born to do. It was like the work of God. You know, when I make my speeches, I always say these same words, that when Martin Luther King spoke, it wasn't him. And I remember being a little child watching television. And to y'all can see, like on Martin Luther King's birthday and stuff, different films and stuff. Well, see, it's like a computer in my brain. When I see it, I would run home just to see them water hose the kids, dragging people, taking them to jail. It was like I had to see this. It was, you know, I was disliking it all the time. But when I spoke it to my mother, I was very serious about it. And when I saw these two guys, a black guy and a white guy in my neighborhood, I know a black guy and a white guy in my neighborhood, they had no business being there. So I know they had to be the freedom fighters. So I dropped the stick playing ball to run over to find out to see was they with the freedom fighters, and it was the first mass meeting being held in America. It was the work of God. And I took them to talk to my mom, and once they talked to her and told her about the first mass meeting being held, I asked could I go with them. And so she said they might not want you to go. They said, oh, she can go, we'll take good care of her. It was dead in the street. My mama walked out there and watched. They told me what to say. I knocked on doors, and that's when my work for God began. It was all about him. Some people were caught up in the act, in the civil rights movement, but some were chosen by God.
I got involved, and there was many marches that we had, and sometimes you have in your mind as a child, okay, you was told you could go to jail, you could get beaten, or you might get killed. So a lot of times I would get in the march, and I would get so far, and then I'd think, I don't want to go to jail today, and I don't want to get killed, and I'm nonviolent, so I don't want to get beaten. So I would go so far and I'd get out. And even when you did that, it was no hard feeling, nobody thought less of you. You know, it was your choice to do it. But one day, I made up my mind and I said, you know, I have sisters and brothers. And maybe I would get beaten, killed, be blessed to go to jail. But whatever way comes, I have sisters and brothers that one day they would go this way and they wouldn't have to endure what I'm enduring now. So I felt like going to jail or get beaten or even killed, that I would make a path for my brothers and sisters that I was leaving at home.
Pam, I'm wondering, as you're listening, in what ways do the stories that the panelists are telling, in what ways can you connect them to your youth growing up in South Africa?
Well, you know, there was a lot of rioting at some point in South Africa. There was some violence that did happen. And, you know, the insurgence of just the will of the people wanting a change. And I think the imposition of really severe sanctions on the country, really kind of the two together, created something that really did eventually come forward in massive change in South Africa. And it was extremely, you know, extreme in that it was, you know, what you were talking about. You know, apartheid was, you know, just basically, you know, talking about the back of the bus, you're talking about not getting on the bus, you're talking about, you know, just extreme segregation on every level, and also the socioeconomic level. I mean, there was disparity for education, there's disparity for every kind of right, really. Black South Africans would have to carry a pass, it was called, to be able to even go from one part of the city to another, and if they were stopped by a policeman and they didn't have a identification that it was a pass that allowed them to actually enter into a certain part of the city, they would then be taken to jail. You know, it was a very, very severe segregation. You know, in terms of everyday living, there was no lapse in that at all. And so it wasn't something that sort of just eased into something else. It was a very stark, you know, happening from one way of living for a people and a nation into something exactly another. So, you know, I was living in South Africa for a short amount of time. You know, I was born in South Africa. I traveled to East Africa and Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and you know, lived in Tanzania and Kenya as well. So we traveled around a lot, and so I was exposed to a lot of different African cultures and different sort of ways of cultures and different lifestyles. And you know, going back always into South Africa, you know, the stark difference between coming from a non-segregated society, even as a really young kid, into a segregated society really hits you pretty hard, because you know, you make friends and you're sort of going out and you go to school together, and you're back in South Africa, and you know, you can't kindergarten, you can't go to school together, but you know, beforehand in another kindergarten situation in a different country, I was able to. We traveled a lot. I went to a lot of different schools. So, you know, I think I became very aware at a very, very young age, and so and you know, the disparity was huge, and was awful. So, you know, when I then lived in Portugal and went back to South Africa in my teens, you know, segregation was still, apartheid was still in force. And it was really difficult, because for me, I had really forged relationships with, I mean, I feel more citizen of the world. I don't really feel like we are, you know, those barriers for me don't really exist, actually. I mean, I hope they don't. But I feel that, you know, I've been exposed to so many different types of cultures and people that I really just meet a person as a person, and that's who I'm seeing. I'm not really kind of, you know, coming from a place of a difference. And, you know, so for me, any injustice is an injustice, whether it's an injustice to a white person, as to a black person, or to an Asian person, or whatever. An injustice is an injustice. And I think from that viewpoint, I think, you know, that's really the core of it, and from my standpoint. But, you know, I mean, your stories are so close to home in that the timeline is still very close in time. And so, you know, generations of today, like kids of 12 and 13 today, would never know an experience like what you experienced at 12 and 13. I mean, you know, the battles are different. There aren't those kinds of battles, although they might be insidious in a different kind of way and context. I mean, race and the racial divide might be there, but it's not that black and white, you know, sort of thing that's in your face. And so I think it's really important for, you know, for kids of today to really to have these stories, told and seen, and so that what you were saying is the civil rights movement. Do you think it's alive and well? Is it here or is it not? I think the continuity of everybody becoming more humane towards each other is really what is important. And so to be able to tell your stories, I think to me, I have a passion about it because I think it is very, very important to have that history, continue, whether it be an oral history tradition or a different medium like film, which is again a narrative form if you take it in that direction. I think it's the impact, I think, is needed, because I don't know, I was actually wanting to ask a question of the panel myself about change. I mean, that's what I'm interested in that, today, how would you invoke the change? What do you see? Like you were talking about people being divided through poverty, class, race distinction, segregation in churches, the segregation that exists still. What would you say to somebody to change that? How do you go about changing that? If it's a nonviolent way, absolutely, but through what tools? I mean, I'm trying to perhaps contribute through film, but what would you say on an everyday level? What should people do?
Me, myself, I feel with different races of people, it's just like the Mexicans in the United States today. People treat them very harshly. They say mean things about them. But what I think we should do is think about how we was treated. You have to treat people according to the way you want to be treated in order to achieve something. And if you're going to treat people with, different, look down on a person because you feel like you have that right, you don't have that right. A person, as I said a few minutes ago, is only two kinds of people, Christians and sinners. And what I mean by that is that that's what God is looking for. That's the unity, that's the love, that's the togetherness. And if we have that, we don't see color. We only see what Jesus wants us to see in a person. And I feel within my heart, if everybody accepted that and believed that in their heart, it would be better.
I think it goes back to what Charles said earlier, education. Education.
By the year 2020, there's a group of people that we'll call liberals. They'll be composed of some black folk, some white folk, and a large number of Hispanics. And they're going to outnumber white folk in the United States. And that's going to change if the white folk don't figure out a way to divide them and they not be able to see that common interest. There's going to be a whole lot of folk elected to office that color instead of that color. See, I got it all.
One more question. Yes.
I'm just really interested in the freedom songs.
A little louder, please.
I'm just interested in the freedom songs. I think they're amazing. And coming from England, we don't have stuff like that because obviously we didn't have the whole slavery. And I'm really inspired by them. I just want to know, how did they come about, and how did you teach them to people, and where did the lyrics come from? And I don't know, just.
Oh, well, let me demonstrate. Freedom songs came from spirituals, gospel, rhythm and blues. Just changed the lyrics to fit the occasion. There's a song called Dogs. Well, there's a dog, right? I dog, took a dog. Alright? Now I want everybody to repeat after me. Dog, dog. Takaka. Tuka. Dog, dog. Dog, dog, takaka. Tuka, dog, dog. Dog, dog, takaka, tuka, dog, dog. Y'all sing like me too. Dog, dog, takaka, tuka, dog, dog. 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 Now that song came about, it was written by the late James Bevel, who was a civil rights worker. And there was this black family and this white family that lived one section over here and one section over there. And of course the dogs could play together, but humans could not play together. So Bevel said, he said, well, if dogs can play together, why can't we play together? So that's how that song came about. You all gonna help me sing, dog?
Yeah.
And when I point to you, that's the part I want you to say what?
Dog, dog, takaka, tuka, dog, dog.
All right. Dog, 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 my dog. I love your dog and my dog. I love my dog and my dog. I love your dog and my dog. I love my dog and my dog. I love your dog. I'm talking about a white dog. I'm talking about a black dog. I'm talking about a coon dog. I'm talking about an integrated dog. All them dogs. All them dogs. All them dogs. And my dog. I love your dog. And then why can't we sit on the apple tree? You walk, walk with me. You walk, talk with me. Well, why don't you hold my hand? Tell me you understand now. Can't you see that you and me I would be so happy? Sit on the apple tree. My little doggy was playing one day down in the middle of our bundle of hay. Another little doggy came along. Say, let's get together and eat this bone. And then, why can't we sit on the apple tree?
Singing behind us every day, the world will be a lot better. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to announce that there will be a dessert reception in the concourse area immediately following this panel. So please, if you have a question that you didn't have a chance to ask, this is an opportunity to talk one-on-one with our panelists and enjoy some sweet treats. I don't know about you, but I'm hungry. So let's go and please give our participants a wonderful round of applause.